Story 1. Ridley Scott's Napoleon 100%. I'm a history buff who loves the Napoleonic period and was really looking forward to a blockbuster film exploring that era. This Hollywood, so I expected and was willing to overlook some historical inaccuracies. But the film was awful. It was the first time I left the cinema feeling sadness and regret at how bad a film could be. I went in excited and left hating the film with every ounce of my being. Story 2. The Dark Tower, as a standalone movie not related to the book, was still terrible. Story 3. Suicide Squad had every good moment in the trailer, and the rest of the movie was boring. Releasing the trailer a year before the film built up so much hype only to leave viewers disappointed. Story 4. The Predator. I am a huge fan of Predator and of Shane Black. How could this not be amazing? Well, Story 5. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is so bad. It literally recreated shots from the original X-Files movie Fight the Future. Plot by plot, it is a disappointment. Story 6. Joker 2. Between casting Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn and Joaquin Phoenix returning as the character, I was excited from the moment it was announced. Upon seeing it, I was like, what the heck happened? Story 7. New Mutants. The trailers made it seem so much better than it turned out to be. Story 8. Independence Day 2. Could have been great. Very disappointing. Story 9. Superman Returns. Kevin Spacey had the opportunity to play a diabolical Lex Luthor, but the role was hokey. Story 10. The Hobbit. It was the first book I ever read. I read it multiple times and went into it expecting something like the book. Man, was I upset. Story 11. All of the Matrix sequels were a major disappointment compared to the first film. Story 12. Prometheus spent months getting ready for answers. He was left with more questions than he had started with. Story 13. Thor, Love and Thunder. For some reason I really thought it could be good. Story 14. Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. None of the sequels have captured the magic of the original, but Jurassic World came awfully close, so I was really excited to see Fallen Kingdom. Once it turned into the movie version of Dinosaur Crisis that no one asked for, I nearly walked out of the theater. Story 15. Ad Astra. Brad Pitt, Tommy Lee Jones, and Donald Sutherland star in a science fiction film. Sounded epic but was very dull. I was disappointed. Story 16. Downsizing. I thought a cat would invade the city and that it would be humorous. I was lectured about global warming being dangerous and about inequality affecting tiny people. Story 17. Not to get too, I am 14 and this is deep, but I realized some years ago that movies I am really looking forward to are almost always disappointing in some way because my expectations are too high. Story 18. For me, it was Terminator Salvation. I remember seeing a preview trailer about a year before it came out. It just did not live up to the hype. It rode on Bale and Worthington's popularity to drive people to the theater. It was not completely terrible, but it is not something I would watch a second time, unlike Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. Story 19. The Many Saints of Newark. I'm a huge fan of The Sopranos. It was not the worst movie in the world, but after such an amazing show I expected much better. Story 20. The Phantom Menace. We waited 16 years for another Star Wars movie, and it was a major letdown when it finally came out. Story 21. Elysium. I love Matt Damon and science fiction blockbusters. I loved the concept of the rich and poor divide and expected it to be a great movie, but it was not. The whole film fell flat. Story 22. Star Wars, The Last Jedi. The first minute was gold, but the moment Poe opened his mouth, I knew the movie was not going to take itself seriously. Story 23. Batman vs. Superman, I think. I was a Man of Steel skeptic, but I liked a lot of the cast and felt like it would be hard to screw up a surefire formula. I did not count on it being so very boring. So much money and time poured into a movie that, when everything is said and done, 20 years from now it will only be remembered for Martha. Story 24. Star Trek Nemesis. I'm an old Trekkie. I saw the original series the first time around and every follow-up as it was released. I loved the Star Trek films. Curiously, the even-numbered films were often the better ones. We were coming up to number 10. Generations was not bad. First Contact was superb. Insurrection was passable. Then Nemesis. What is this? It is easily the worst of the entire 10 films. Story 25, The Dark Tower. 6 books cannot be condensed into 90 minutes. I blame the writers and producers for trying. I feel bad for Idris. This could have been a great project with the potential for a series of excellent movies, but it was ruined by poor creative choices. Story 26. Pearl Harbor suffered from an unnecessary romantic subplot that became the main plot, turning it into a love triangle, stretching the movie to 3 hours and taking ridiculous liberties with historical facts. Story 27, The Hobbit. I was literally counting the days until it came out. I took off work and even splurged to see it in 3-dimensional format. Maybe I built it up too much. It just didn't have the magic of the Lord of the Rings movies. Story 28. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. The first and second films were amazing. After Vanilla Ice appeared in the second film, I expected ladies love Cool James or Michael Jackson in the third film. Story 29. Alien vs. Predator. As a 1990s kid, we had comic books, novels, excellent movies before Alien 3, action figures, and video games based on the properties. Hearing about a possible movie was super exciting. Apparently, it would have been based on the Capcom arcade game, with Arnold Schwarzenegger possibly reprising Dutch. But it did not happen. Instead, we got the Paul W. S. Anderson film. Even worse, we got Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which really hurt the franchises for a while. It never recovered properly, in my humble opinion. Story 30. The Matrix sequels and Avatar 2 became boring ramblings. There was no point or conclusion, and Avatar 2 felt endless. At times it felt like watching a screensaver rather than a movie. Story 31. Miami Vice was the only time I fell asleep in a theater. I would not say I was completely disappointed, but it did not meet my expectations. Story 32. The Flash. I was hoping it was just a live-action remake of the animated movie I loved. Little did I know it was nothing like it. Story 33. I thought the live-action Lion King would be as amazing as Aladdin, but when my brother and I saw it, we were very disappointed. Story 34. The last 2 James Bond movies disappointed me. I love the franchise, but they just do not work for me. Poor villain development in arcs, pointless Range Rover action sequences, and random fights in locations that do not matter. That scene with Bond on a table with a laser pointed at him, and he still gets away, was ridiculous. Can we just have more GoldenEye, Casino Royale, and Die Another Day? Story 35. Pacific Rim 2. 3 things I loved as a kid. Giant robots, ninjas, and kaiju. The first film was decent enough. The sequel looked good from the trailer and even had a robot ninja. As a grown man with a family and the weight of responsibility that comes with it, I camped out for tickets to Pacific Rim 2. I bought a giant cookie, popcorn, soda, and a slice of pizza, and I was practically sitting in the theater with a little flag that said "Go Go Robo Ninja." I got home and my wife asked, "How was your fun day?" "It was okay," I said. I have not spoken about that movie to anyone since. Story 36. I remember walking into the theater with my brothers, all excited to see Pearl Harbor. It was so bad they wrote it into a song in the movie Team America. Story 37. I know many will disagree. There are parts of the movie I genuinely liked, but Deadpool and Wolverine fall flat for me. The Deadpool series seems to get a pass on the cringy, over-the-top, forced humor common in Marvel movies because it is rated R. Story 38. Prometheus had stupid protagonists and a nonsensical script with plot holes you could drive an armored column through. I am obsessed with the first 2 films. I even quite like Resurrection, but this was just shit. Story 39. World War Z. The name was the same as the book, but that is where the similarities end. Story 40. I was somewhat disappointed by The Equalizer 2. It is an amazing movie, but it felt underwhelming compared to The Equalizer. Story 41. Star Wars. The Force Awakens. It was just a rehash of the original A New Hope. Story 42. John Wick 4. I had enjoyed the other 3 immensely, but I felt this one fell short. Story 43. Prometheus. I really thought it would be great and I tried to like it, but when the ship fell on the protagonist and she escaped, I completely checked out. Story 44, Dark Knight Rises. I saw it twice in theaters because I could not believe how bad it was. I thought I must have missed scenes that would make it better, but it was worse on the second viewing. Story 45, Miracle at St. Anna. I only knew Spike Lee from his previous movie Inside Man, which I loved. As an early teenager, I was obsessed with World War II, and the trailer made it look so good. The opening battle was a sign of what was to come. The white soldiers were played so comically incompetent that 12-year-old me laughed. The black soldiers seemed to be the only ones who knew how to fire rifles, but they could only shoot by firing straight up with their eyes closed while waving the rifle in circles. After that comic battle, the middle act dragged on forever, producing nothing of interest. I got bored and it became the first movie I never finished. A great premise but terribly put together. Story 46. I wouldn't say I was completely disappointed, but I was hoping the Super Mario Bros. Movie would be better. It is supposed to be about the Super Mario Bros., but Luigi was imprisoned for over half the movie. I hoped he would escape, go on his own separate adventure, and reunite with Mario later, perhaps overcoming some of his fears. Story 47. Sahara. I had hoped that more Clive Cussler books would be made into movies. They turned Dirk Pitt and Al into cartoon characters. Steve Zahn was cast as a swarthy Italian. What the heck? Did any of the writers even read the book? Story 48. Deadpool and Wolverine felt like a bad YouTube parody. I know I am going to get criticized for saying this, but most of the film relied on swearing and sexual jokes delivered by every character, not just Deadpool, and that felt like a crutch rather than genuine humor. This comes from someone who curses like a sailor in real life. The lack of gore was disappointing and the film felt soulless. Deadpool 2 is one of my favorite Marvel movies, so Deadpool and Wolverine felt like a slap in the face. Story 49. Deadpool and Wolverine. 5 minutes in, I realized it was basically a quip fest with both characters trading one-liners. They even managed to get Jesus in there, but by that time I was no longer listening. Story 50. I saw Spider-Man 3, part of the Sam Raimi trilogy, at a midnight showing. Sigh. Story 51. The Last Jedi derailed the momentum established by The Force Awakens. Story 52. Civil War. I still liked it, but it was not the movie I thought it was going to be. Story 53. Gangs of New York. What a wonderful concept and time period to capture. But when it came out, it was underwhelming. Story 54. The Force Awakens was such a disappointment, and it only got worse with the 2 horrible sequels. Story 55. I was so excited for Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch. It was so bad, though. I was in denial for a while and lied to myself that I actually liked it. That was the first, but not the last, time Zack Snyder hyped me up and then released a dud. Story 56. Oppenheimer. The story behind the film is great, but I found the movie really disappointing and needlessly long. Story 57. The second and third Matrix movies were not as good. The first was awesome. I was really looking forward to the recent Dungeons and Dragons movie, but I thought it was just okay. Story 58. Angels and Demons. I loved the Da Vinci Code, and Ewan McGregor is one of my favorite actors. The movie strayed far from the book, which was tense and exciting, and turned it into a dull and ridiculous affair. That was disappointing. Story 59. I Am Legend. I read the book and really liked the premise. The trailer looked amazing, and I was sold. Then I watched it. Story 60. The Rise of Skywalker undid everything interesting that The Last Jedi set up. It did not answer lingering mysteries from The Force Awakens, such as the Knights of Ren and so on, and it shoehorned in Palpatine with no logic. Yes, Palpatine constantly reappearing via clones was a feature in the old expanded universe, but those stories usually had better setup and payoff than The Rise of Skywalker. The movie was terrible. It contained enough material for a whole trilogy crammed into one film because Disney did not properly plot a trilogy and allowed different people to throw spaghetti at the wall. Story 61. Many lately. Ridley Scott's Napoleon. The Star Wars sequels. Deadpool 2. Joker, Folie à Deux. Alex Garland's Civil War. Story 62, White Noise. The book was fantastic, but the movie was terrible. It turns out the only mumblecore proponent I can tolerate is Lena Dunham. Story 63, War, starring Jason Statham and Jet Li. You do not watch a movie with that title and those actors expecting intellectual enlightenment, but one suspension of disbelief required was that the younger version of Jet Li's character had no accent while the older version did. What should have been an epic final fight was a poorly lit slapfest that was beneath both actors. Story 64, Without Remorse. My favorite book was turned into one of the worst action movies I have ever seen. It had nothing to do with the book except the characters' names. Story 65, Avatar, The Way of Water. I loved the first one. The second took 15 years, and I thought it would be worth the wait. It was not. I hated it. Story 66. I didn't know anything about it beforehand, but when my girlfriend asked me to go see Twilight with her and said it was about vampires, I got extremely excited. I learned about it that evening, and by the end of the night after watching it, I was so angry at how terrible it was. I laughed out loud several times, especially when he started to sparkle. Story 67. Not a movie, but the Game of Thrones series after seasons 3 and 4 was an utter letdown. Story 68. Oppenheimer played painfully loud at times in the theater. Story 69. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I was so excited to see a new Indiana Jones film after 19 years. I took my children and thought it would be great, but it was not. The story was a mess. Story 70. I would say Ender's Game and Anchorman 2. Ender's Game wasn't terrible, but it badly needed to be at least 2 films or a short television series. It was too short for satisfying character development, and there wasn't a good build-up for the surprise at the end. I disagree with the casting of Harrison Ford, though I usually love his movies. I imagine it's tough to sell a popular but not hyped novel as needing 2 films. Anchorman 2 had its moments, but it leaned too heavily on the first film. Anchorman is tough to follow up. Story 71. A Wrinkle in Time was one of my first favorite books. My sister and I saw the 2018 film. Although we agreed the story could have taken place in the same universe as the book, I was disappointed. The characters felt different from those in the book, and they omitted an entire planet that was one of the best parts. Story 72. Any Harry Potter film left me less and less eager. Although they improved, my eagerness waned with each one. I know they are loved, just not by me, unfortunately. The films couldn't live up to the expectations set by the books. I'm in the wrong. You should never compare the 2 mediums. Story 73, Shutter Island. I am a huge Lehane fan. I love the book, and Scorsese directed the film, so I saw it immediately. Spoiler: the ending of the movie was not faithful to the book. I went to see Dennis Lehane give a talk at a local library immediately after the film's release, and someone asked him about it. He said roughly, "There is no one as useless on a movie set as the writer of the book upon which it was based. Do you think I am going up to Marty and telling him that is not what I meant?" Story 74. Probably a cliche at this point, but flaws aside, I really enjoyed The Phantom Menace when it was new. So when Attack of the Clones came out, I was excited, but within 10 minutes I was no longer excited. That movie was beyond bad. The wooden acting, the lack of any space battles beyond a 5-minute asteroid chase, and the awful dialogue. It was coarse, rough, and irritating, and it permeated the film. Story 75. Prometheus had so much promise as an origin story for the xenomorphs and the space jockeys, but it fell flat on its face. Story 76. The Last Jedi was a crushing disappointment. The Force Awakens had its flaws, but it left fans excited to see more, and then we got that absolute disaster of a sequel. Story 77. The Barbie movie had a lot of hype, and the preview clips looked hilarious, but it fell very short for me. Story 78. Man of Steel. Wait a second. Your planet is about to explode, so you are putting war criminals inside a ship that has enough fuel and food for intergalactic travel and will also be safe inside a pocket dimension while the rest of your people die. It did not get better from there. The whole movie was a mess. Story 79. I watched Donnie Darko for the first time last week. It had a lot of hype, and I finished it feeling very confused. Story 80, two films, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. I love The Fifth Element. I wanted more from that director. That movie was so flat after the intro. The intro had me even more pumped. Sausage Party. Okay, I loved the trailer. I thought I would be laughing my ass off at some childish, crude humor. I was ready for it. I needed it. The scene with the potato getting peeled had my office mates and me laughing so hard. The movie was just awful. By the time I saw the scenes from the trailer in the movie, I didn't even laugh at them. I was already sad and bored. Story 81. Inferno 2016. I was a bit disappointed to see it ended differently from the novel. Story 82. The Suicide Squad trailer had me anticipating the release like a movie has not in a long time. Story 83. My husband is a Napoleonic scholar, and he was very dismayed by the movie. Story 84. This dates me, but I was excited to hear about Missouri Breaks in the 1970s. Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson in the same Western seemed promising. It had its moments with Brando's quirky Irish brogue and eccentric behavior, but it was pretty disappointing overall. Story 85. Aragon. When I was younger, I loved the books. The film was horrific. Story 86. Frozen 2 followed Rogue One by putting many evocative shots and images from the trailer into the film. It still failed to be a good movie. Story 87. One of my favorite science fiction books growing up was Battlefield Earth. We all know what happened there. Story 88. The second and third films of the newer Star Wars trilogy. The first film was interesting with so much potential, and then that happened. Story 89. The Time Traveler's Wife. My absolute favorite book. Complete terrible movie. Story 90. Alien. Romulus. Seeing the sets that were heavily inspired by Alien, Isolation made me hopeful. Then it became strange. Story 91. Hostage was a great book with memorable characters. A movie adaptation starring Bruce Willis was announced and was okay. The trailer was decent and the opening scene was strong. After that, the film drifted. The villains were bland and the movie became unremarkable. Story 92. I saw Pirates of the Caribbean. The Curse of the Black Pearl with a friend, and we thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. It was the right mix of adventure, suspense, and humor. I had to move far away but made sure to see Pirates of the Caribbean. Dead Man's Chest the first night it was in town. This one had too much going on for me to really enjoy anything. Took itself far too seriously. I'm not sure even my friend's company could have salvaged it for me. I have seen Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl several times since, but the third, fourth, and fifth films not even once. Story 93. Krampus. I was so excited to see what fresh ideas the director would execute. He directed Trick or Treat, a movie about Halloween that subverted tropes and expectations. I was expecting something similar, taking an old concept and making it feel brand new. Instead, it was a regular horror movie. Story 94. Tron. Legacy. The movie is 14 years old now. When the trailer first appeared, it was a visual spectacle. I love science fiction movies and could not wait to see it in three-dimensional format. I saw it and felt underwhelmed. It was a visual spectacle for its time but predictable. Story 95. Star Wars. The Force Awakens. It was the only time I walked out of the theater and returned my ticket to the box office attendant. Story 96. Hocus Pocus 2. Nothing will ever be as good as the original. Story 97. Hocus Pocus 2. Would it have killed them to bring back any of the original cast besides the witches? Even the cat? Story 98. Mulan live action. They missed the film's point, gave her special powers, and omitted Mushu's comic relief. It was very disappointing. Story 99. Aragon. My mom convinced me to read the book first, so I did. When I finally saw the movie, I was extremely disappointed. Story 100. I was so excited for Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. I read an article in Wired and got excited. I love The Fifth Element, so I was psyched for a new Luc Besson film. I got advance tickets for opening night. We had great seats. I hyped this for a week with my wife. We arrived and the movie started. The interdimensional supermarket scene was cool, but everything else was disappointing. About 20 minutes in, I turned to my wife and said, "I am so sorry. I lost movie-picking privileges for a while." Story 101. I played World of Warcraft back in the day and was very excited for the movie. The games have very rich lore and it could have been the start of a movie franchise. I remember being excited to go to the cinema. I was delighted by the Murloc in the first scene, but the rest disappointed me. Still, I would like a sequel focused on Thrall or Sylvanas. Story 102. In the final Underworld movie, they could not even give the dude an on-screen death. It happened between movies. Story 103. Alice in Wonderland. I thought Alice, Burton, and that cast would be so much fun, but I did not enjoy it at all. We even paid extra for three-dimensional viewing. Story 104. Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. Why call it Alice in Wonderland if you are not going to follow the actual story and instead write a fanfic about her being a superhero? Story 105. Easily The Last Jedi. I really liked The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi is, to this day, the only Star Wars movie I have ever walked out of feeling disappointed. My wife looked over at me and said, "Sorry, honey," because it was that obvious on my face even though I had not said a word. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.